we're going to try the following quadratic word problem. It says the sum of two numbers is 23. The sum of their squares is 305. What are the two numbers? So in this question, I don't have a lot to go on. I've got two pieces of information. One is that the sum, which means when you add the two numbers, you get an answer of 23. And the other one says that the sum of their squares, which means if you take the numbers and you square them, right, and add them together, that would give you 305. And then it wants me to figure out the two numbers. And we could try to do that by guess and check, but we're trying to find a slightly better method to do that. So whenever you have a word problem, you should always start with a let statement and let x be something and then go from there. So when you look at the question, I like to look at the last sentence which says, what are the two numbers? Usually that's a hint about what I want to let my let statements be about. So I've got two numbers, so I'm going to let the first number be something, and I'm going to let the second number be something. I'm going to let something be the first number, and I'm going to let something be the second number. Now when I'm doing word problems, most of the times I'm going to let one of those two things be x. So I think in this case I'm going to let x be the first number. Okay? To find the second number, it tells me that the sum of the two numbers is 23. So if I take that first number and I add the second number, I end up with 23. So I know that the first number is x. So if I wanted to find the second number, all I need to do is take the x to the other side to get that my second number is going to be 23 minus x. So if the first number is x, the second number is going to be 23 minus x. So that's our good start there. We've got our two let statements, and sometimes that's the hardest part of the question. So the second thing it tells me is the sum of the squares is 305. So if I take the first number and the second number and I square them and then add them together, it'll give me 305. So I'm just going to write here that the sum, right, is going to be my first number squared plus the second number squared. And I like to write a number sentence first. I find it works out a little bit better for me, and I tend not to get as confused when I'm doing a question. So it's a good idea to write it out in words first and then go from there. So I know the sum of the squares is 305. I know the first number is x. We decided to let that be x. And my second number is 23 minus x. All right, so 305, it's just 305. X squared is x squared. Now to do 23 minus x squared, when we square something, we multiply it by itself. So I need to do 23 minus x times 23 minus x and FOIL that out. So I actually think maybe I'm going to do that over here on the side. So I'm going to multiply the first ones together. So 23 times 23 is 529. And then 23 times negative x is negative 23x. Negative x times 23 is negative 23x. And negative x times negative x is positive x squared. So here we're adding x squared. Negative 23 and negative 23 makes negative 46, so negative 46x, and then plus 529. All right, so I'm going to collect up my like terms here. So x squared plus x squared is 2x squared minus 46x plus 529. That's that's equal to 305. And then if I want to do anything with this, I really need all of the terms to be on the same side. So I'm going to take that 305 to the other side by subtracting 305. To get 0 on this side is 2x squared minus 46x, and then 529 minus 305 is 224. All right, so from here what you need to do is you need to solve, and you have some choices. So we've learned two different ways of solving. We've talked about how to solve by factoring. We've also talked about how to solve by the quadratic formula. So it's up to you what you want to do. We are going to either solve by factoring or we can use the formula. It really just comes down to the numbers. So if I look at the numbers and they're decimals and I don't really want to work with them, I would use the quadratic formula. If I look at them and the numbers are really big and I don't think I can come up with two numbers that multiply to that, then I would also use the formula. But if the numbers seem reasonable and I think that I might have a good chance of factoring, then I would try factoring. So I think maybe this one I'm going to solve by factoring. If you want to do the quadratic formula, you can do that and then just check to see at the end that your answer is the same. So if I want to factor this, the first thing I notice is that all of the numbers are divisible by 2. So I'm going to start by taking out a 2. So I get x squared minus 23x plus, and that should be, I think, 112. Yes, it is. And then we're going to look for two numbers that multiply to 112 and add to negative 23. Well, let's see what I can come up with. 7 times 16 would equal 112. And in order to get that negative 13, they'd need to be a negative 7 and a negative 16, which would still multiply to positive 112. So, I'm going to leave the 2 in front. We have x squared. Doesn't really matter here, so minus 7x minus 16x plus 112. Out of the first pairing, I can take out an x that they have in common, and I'm left with x minus 7. Out of the second pairing, I believe I can take out that negative 16, and I'm left with x minus 7. So I end up with 2. They both have an x minus 7 here, so times x minus 7 and x minus 16. So that's just the factoring part here. We actually need to solve. So to solve, what we're going to do is look at what makes each number in the bracket here equal 0, right? Because we need it to equal 0 on this side, so 2 times something, one of those somethings has to be a 0. So we're going to look at what makes x minus 7 equal 0, and what makes x minus 16 equal 0. I don't worry about the 2 because it doesn't have an x, it's just a 2. So here we're going to add 7 to get x equals 7. And on this side we're going to add 16 to get x equals 16. Which means x is 7, x equals 16. We decided that x was going to represent the first number. So that doesn't mean the two numbers are 7 and 16. It means that the first number could be 7 or the first number could be 16. So my first number could equal 7, or the first number could equal 16. So if the first number is 7, the second number we get by doing 23 minus x. That's what our let statement said here. We said we were going to let the second number be 23 take away x. So if I do 23 take away 7, well, look at that, I get 16. And if the first number was 16, then the second number is going to be 23 take away 16, which is 7. Is it always going to work out that these are the two answers? No. Sometimes you will get two completely different sets, but in this case we actually just ended up with the two numbers being 7 and 16. So the numbers are 7 and 16.